Welcome to the DTFC Side Project Advice channel, where we dive into students' side projects to give them specific advice on how to help them reach their goals. I'm Dan Rodriguez, founder of the Disrupting the Future Coalition, the DTFC. In this video, I get to talk to a student about her side project idea to create a to-do list. Hi Claire, welcome to the DTFC Side Project Advice channel.
Hi, thank you for having me on your channel.
Yeah, thanks for joining. So I'm going to hand it over to you and you can run us through your presentation.
This is my presentation on the side project that I'm focusing on. And basically what I'm focusing on is a to-do list in terms of website. That's a to-do list where I'm really focusing on the user experience and user interface parts of that of the website. For my problem statement, I'm going to create a website that's a to-do list, and I'm going to be comparing like existing to-do list products or existing to-do list websites and improving upon like pain points that users may be experiencing through using these to-do list websites and just improving on the overall user experience of these websites. And why did I decide to take on this project? I decided to take on this project because I am interested in web development and also want to try doing something involved in user experience and user interface. Target market, I picked young adults or adults that can either be students, professionals, business owners, or really anyone who is in need of a to-do list, because my product or my to-do list can anyone who wants to organize their ideas or organize their things that they have to do can use this website. For my development plan, I'm going to be researching existing products and identifying their points of improvement. And I'm going to identify those points of improvement either through my own observations and my own research or through finding actual user testimonies to say, oh, these are points of the user experience, or these are pain points that I have when using these products. And so that'll be step one. And then I'm also going to want to learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript so that I can actually develop and make the website myself. And then, yeah, so I'm going to then be implementing the changes that I've identified through my research or through the user testimonies that I find. And then from there, I'm going to need to actually develop my web design. So that's going to be also involving the user interface and deciding what I want the layout and those things to be like on my website. And then in terms of the decision-making process, the things that I thought through was, how am I going to create a website? That was one thing. And then how can I create a solution to current user experience problems? And then another part was, how can I make sure my solution is effective? In terms of my prototyping status, as of right now, I just have a very rough prototype that is a basic HTML and CSS file. So that is the current status that I'm at. My next steps and my path forward would be to start to research what are the existing solutions out there, what are the user experience flaws that people are experiencing, what are the pain points in current to-do list websites. So as I mentioned previously, trying to find those flaws and pain points. And the last part would be improving on my current HTML file with adding CSS, JavaScript, and just improving on the user interface. Some questions that I have for Dan and some unknowns that I want to discuss is, how can I ensure that my solution will be effective and that I'm not just creating another to-do list that doesn't actually solve any problems?
I think, Claire, I think you've done a good job of developing a plan and figuring out what your next steps are. So, I mean, I think from a logical standpoint, your development plan makes sense. And I think it's definitely a good idea to research what existing products are out there, right? I mean, I think you're definitely on the right track in trying to figure out what problems exist, and looking at user testimonies, like that definitely makes sense, right? I think that's definitely a step that you want to put in, because if you can figure out what already is out there and what they're doing well and maybe also not doing well, then you can try and figure out what you need to implement on your side to improve on those areas. So definitely, I think that's a great plan. And I think your decision-making process about how to get through that, and I mean, even the next steps going forward, I think those all make sense as well. So, I mean, good job in putting that together.
Thank you.
So, in terms of answering some of your questions here, I think like a couple of the things that I'd like to start with are why did you pick a to-do list to be your project application?
Mm-hmm. Well, I picked a to-do list because I didn't want to just create something new that I wasn't even sure people needed or wanted. But something like a to-do list is something that we know people need it, we know people use it. And so I can take an existing product and improve upon it instead of just making something that I'm not even sure anyone even needs or wants or uses.
That's a great point. I think that's a really good reason to do something like this. So, I mean, from your own personal experience, are there things that you are aware of already that work well in current to-do lists, or like from your experience of what you've used?
Um, yeah, I think in my experience of what I used, a to-do list it should have like multiple elements without being like overwhelming, I guess. So it should be able to like link to your calendar or like those types of things where it's not just like an isolated list, like it can be linked to other things for convenience and things like that. But also you don't want it to be too overwhelming because then it kind of misses the point and can get distracting.
Right. And I mean, like, I guess on the other side, like, are there certain things that like you think the current solutions are not doing well?
Yeah, that's something that I'm looking to figure out in my next steps and in my research is really focus and find those things that current solutions are not doing well. But currently, I still have to do research on that and figure out exactly what that is.
Okay. So I mean, I think that's definitely a good next step for sure. What is your overall goal? And I think, like you mentioned here, you are interested in trying web development and getting into user experience. So are you thinking about this from like your resume perspective, or like in terms of trying to actually get a job out of this, or is this more of like just an interest that you're working towards right now, and then maybe after that you would make some decisions?
This is definitely something I would potentially want to get a job in, but a lot of the reason of why I'm doing this is so that I can see like what it's like to do it, see if this is something I'm like really interested in, and also this like my program at school is like really focused on like user design, and that's like one of the aspects of my degree. So I was really interested in like going deeper in that and trying it out myself.
So what would you say are things that your website needs to have, or that this to-do list, like what kind of features or requirements do you have for this to-do list, so that you would, if we were to say that this was like a project that was a success, what do you think some of the requirements would be that you have to make sure that you're including in this?
Some of the requirements I would say would be to like make sure that I'm improving upon the specific areas that have been identified as being uh, not a good user experience or pain points that the user is experiencing. So like definitely need to include, based on my research, figure out what those exact things are and then include those. But then I also need to make sure that in terms of what is working in current solutions, that it meets that standard and possibly exceeds it.
I guess like how much of that relates to like what you're trying to actually learn? Because I think you mentioned as well that there are certain skills or certain technologies that you want to learn, like HTML or CSS or JavaScript. So how much of that ties into what you're trying to do from the actual like goal of the to-do list?
There's definitely multiple things I want to learn, like HTML, CSS, JavaScript are like, that's like the application of like my user experience like goal. Like I just want to like focus on the user experience, and I'm doing that through creating a website. And I'm also interested in just like develop in like website development. I find that interesting. And in terms of what I want to learn as well, I want to learn how to design a product with a user in mind.
I think the thing that you want to be aware of is that if you're trying to like dual purpose it, which is I think what you're trying to do is you're trying to learn something and have a useful application at the same time. It's easy to go down certain paths which take you too far away from your end goal. So I think that's like definitely something to be considering as you're going through this is like how much of each of those technologies do you have to learn or do you want to learn? Because that might be a separate piece to actually achieving your goal here, right? You might not have to learn as much just to do the to-do list, but if you have certain other requirements in terms of like the knowledge you're going to gain, then you might either want to try and figure out how to incorporate some of those as actual requirements for your website or just, I guess, prioritize which skills or which certain things you want to learn because otherwise it can be easy to go down the route where you try and learn how to do JavaScript or HTML from like the entire perspective where you might not need to actually learn some of those things to get your to-do list up and running.
I definitely agree with what you're saying in terms of making sure that I'm not like going too broad in terms of like learning HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Like those are all very useful, but I don't necessarily need to learn all of it to complete my task of making a to-do list, just completing the necessary parts of that to apply to my to-do list. So yeah, definitely agree with that.
A secondary goal that you have in mind, potentially like trying to get a job within this? I mean, I think you mentioned that already earlier, because I think that should also probably shape what your eventual prototype ends up being. And so what I mean by that is, do you have certain jobs or certain roles that you've already seen that are in the market that you would like to be applying to? Because I think then if you're able to look at what their requirements are or what the qualifications are for those kinds of roles, you can try and see if you can incorporate some of those aspects into your to-do list as well. And then maybe that'll help, again, give you a triple benefit or a double benefit, right?
I would say there is a secondary goal if possible. If I'm doing this side project and I'm really enjoying it, then definitely will want to potentially apply for jobs in this domain. And I I have looked into what it takes uh, to apply to these types of jobs, and they require like portfolios and things like that, and just evidence of your work. So if this goes well and I do well on this, then potentially I could use this for future job applications.
Right. Yep. So I mean, I think that's definitely a good plan, and I think that's for sure something you want to look into is see what pieces are companies looking for when they're hiring people for those roles. Because if you can incorporate those into your actual project, then it's a bonus, right? So in terms of like the to-do list itself, what do you think employers would be thinking about, or what do you think they would value in what you're trying to produce?
I think that they would value the fact that I'm trying to look for problems that exist in current products, like that are out there on the market and that are involved in businesses and have designers and people working on them. And so for me, identifying like points of improvements or issues within those things can be seen as valuable because it's more of a realistic application and something that like mimics what they're going to want you to do in a potential job like this.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I think that you covered that pretty well. I think definitely from a business perspective, they usually want to see like an good application, right? I think that's where a lot of students struggle is with picking projects that don't necessarily have a real world application or don't have, I guess, like a value proposition, which I think yours definitely does. So I mean, I think you're definitely on the right track of trying to put that together. Um, is there any differences that you can think of that are relating to like the target market itself, right? Like, are there different ways that a to-do list would be required for a student versus a professional versus a business owner? Because then that might also have to fit into your requirements, right?
I can definitely see different ways that a to-do list can be made to be more beneficial depending on the exact person, like a student or professional. So potentially that could be something that I incorporate into my solution if I find that is necessary.
Yeah, for sure. And was this something that you think you might want to try and monetize at some point in the future, or like actually offer to other people? Like, let's say your to-do list is actually beating some of the current to-do lists that are in the market right now. Do you have any goals in mind of like trying to take it that route?
I think definitely if that could be the end goal of being able to monetize it or getting it out there as an actual product, that is definitely like an end goal. But definitely right now, I'm not anywhere close to that, but still would say that that would be a nice goal to have in mind as I do this.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like, and that's kind of my point in bringing up that question is to get you to kind of think a little bit ahead, if possible, to what that like. Are there going to be any changes that you're going to have to make to get it from point A to point B, where you're actually able to monetize this, right? So again, I think you're doing a good job in finding out what your competitors are doing or what competitive products or existing products are doing. So I think that's definitely something to focus on as well. Is like, is there a way for you to take this to a monetization level or actually offer this as a real product, right? To jump to the questions that you had in terms of will your solution be effective, and then just making sure that you're creating something that actually solves something. So I think again, I think your next steps and your path forward are going to help you to figure that out. Because again, if you're thinking about from a business kind of perspective or looking at what other people are doing, then you're able to actually figure out if your product is valuable or not, right? So I think if you can even think about like other users that you might want to then run some testing on, or other people that you can maybe get some feedback from, I think that might be another area for you to think about too, is who can you actually share this with once you've gotten it to the level that you are willing to put it in like user testing or trials, so that you can actually figure out whether it is effective, right?
I think that like user testing, that could be a really good way to figure out whether users are responding to it and whether they actually find it helpful. So yeah, I should definitely include that in my next steps once I've gotten a more advanced prototype.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think your point about looking at testimonials of certain people of other products can hopefully get you to the point where you have certain features that you're trying to implement to solve actual problems, right? Because I mean, obviously, you can get other people to test this, but if they've already given you testimonials, then that's a good indication of where you should be heading, right?
Yes, definitely.
Thanks, Claire, for joining on the show. And I mean, I think you've done a good job in developing a plan and figuring out how to take it from your prototype to the next level. So I mean, I'm definitely interested in seeing how this works out for you, and I hope maybe you'll be able to come back and share what you've learned, like in a few weeks or months or whenever it is that you're able to get this project out the door. And I think you're definitely on the right track.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. And this has been a really great conversation. So thank you.
Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the DTFC's Side Project Advice channel.